Maya lived in a small, crumbling house on the edge of the town. Her life had never been easy. She was poor, struggling to make ends meet. But there was one constant in her life, Aaron. Aaron was her lover, but there was something different about him. He wasn't like any other man. He had strange, glowing eyes that always seemed to follow her, even in the dark. His presence felt both comforting and unsettling, and no matter how many times Maya asked him about it, he would only smile and change the subject. He told her they had been meant to be together, that their bond was special. Maya loved him, but there was always something nagging at the back of her mind, something that made her feel uneasy when he wasn't around. Still, she never questioned him too much. He always returned to her, and in his presence, the world felt a little less cold. But one morning, things changed. Aaron had left the house early, something about needing to take care of business. Maya didn't think much of it. She had grown used to his mysterious comings and goings. However, that day, something didn't feel right. She woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest, as though a dark cloud was hovering over her. Her head throbbed, and there was a strange, nauseating ache deep inside her. She tried to shake it off, thinking it was just exhaustion. But as the hours passed, the sickness worsened. Maya could barely stand. She felt lightheaded, and the house seemed colder than usual. The air itself felt thick, as though the walls were closing in around her. The darkness of the house seemed to be getting darker with each passing minute. It was as though something invisible was watching her. Maya stumbled toward the small kitchen, hoping that a glass of water might help. But as she reached for the faucet, the world around her began to blur. Her vision wavered, and the room spun. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Something was wrong, far worse than just sickness. She collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking. She could feel it now, the presence. Something dark and powerful was in the house. She wasn't alone. Her only thought was, where was Aaron? The house was eerily silent as Maya lay on the cold, wooden floor. Her breath was shallow, and each attempt to stand was met with a wave of dizziness that forced her back down. Every corner of the room seemed to grow darker, the shadows stretching longer, as if the very house itself was alive, watching her. She could feel it, something sinister lurking, just out of sight. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Through her blurred vision, she saw a figure enter the room. It was Aaron. He stood there for a moment, his dark silhouette framed by the faint light that poured in from the hallway. Maya's pulse quickened. She was desperate for him, yet a strange unease settled over her. There was something different about him tonight. Aaron closed the door behind him, his eyes scanning the room. When they landed on her, he froze for a brief moment, his expression unreadable. But then he rushed to her side, kneeling down, his cold hands brushing her fevered skin. Maya, what happened? His voice was low, almost too calm, but there was an edge of concern in it. His touch felt colder than usual, and the chill sent a shiver through her body. I don't know. Maya's voice trembled as she struggled to speak. I felt sick, like something was wrong. I couldn't, her words faltered, as her mind became clouded again. She could feel her body weakening, her life force draining away. Aaron's gaze grew intense, and Maya could see his eyes flicker with something she couldn't place. A shadow crossed his face, and he slowly stood up, walking toward the center of the room. His movements were deliberate, almost predatory. Something's not right here, he muttered, his voice distant. This wasn't a simple illness. Maya tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The room felt as though it was closing in on her. Aaron, please, what's happening to me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped into the center of the room and began to chant softly under his breath. Maya's pulse quickened as the air grew heavier, and she could feel something dark stirring, something ancient and powerful. She tried to speak, but her body was numb, paralyzed by the energy in the room. Aaron turned to her, his eyes glowing a faint red in the dim light. Maya, you've been marked. His voice was barely a whisper, but it sent a chill through her entire being. And now, the consequences will follow. The room felt colder, the shadows around Maya deepening as if they were closing in on her. Aaron's words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. You've been marked. Maya tried to speak, but her throat was tight, as if invisible hands were squeezing the words from her. Her body ached, and her vision wavered. She could feel a strange pull inside her chest, as if something beyond the mortal world was trying to drag her into its depths. She gasped for air, but her lungs felt tight, her breath shallow and desperate. Aaron stood motionless, his dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. The red glow in his pupils flickered like flames dancing in the night. His usual gentle demeanor was gone, replaced by something darker, more primal. "I don't understand," Maya whispered, struggling to lift her hand toward him. "What do you mean, marked?" Aaron's lips curled into a cold, almost sadistic smile. He took a step toward her, his movements slow, deliberate. "You're not just sick, Maya. You're being called by something much older, much darker than anything you've known. A force far more dangerous than any disease. It's pulling you away from me, pulling you into the darkness." Maya's heart pounded in her chest. Her eyes filled with fear, but she couldn't look away from him. "Please, help me, Aaron. You have to help me." He knelt beside her, his cold fingers brushing her forehead. His touch was like ice, and the sensation sent an unnatural jolt of energy through her. The moment his hand made contact with her skin, Maya felt the connection, a bond between them that went beyond love, beyond any human understanding. It was something otherworldly, something binding her to him in a way she hadn't realized before. "I can help you, Maya," Aaron whispered, his voice dark and full of promises. "But there's a price." Maya's eyes fluttered open, her body too weak to fight, but her mind still filled with confusion. "A price?" she managed to croak. "What do you mean?" Aaron's smile faded, and his face became serious. "To save you, I'll have to bind you to me completely. You will never be free again. But you will live, and I will protect you. You'll belong to me, body and soul. No one will be able to hurt you, but you will owe me. Forever." The air around them grew thicker, heavier. Maya could feel the weight of his words sinking into her chest, the gravity of the decision pressing on her like an invisible force. She wanted to resist, wanted to scream, to run, but the darkness was already pulling her in. She could feel it tugging at her, an ancient force that seemed to come from within the very walls of the house. "Will you accept my offer, Maya?" Aaron asked, his voice low and commanding. "Or will you fade away?" Maya closed her eyes, her heart racing as she thought about what Aaron was asking. She had always trusted him, always loved him, but could she trust him now? Was it worth the price he demanded? Would she survive, even if it meant losing herself to him? "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Save me." Aaron's eyes darkened, the red glow burning brighter. "You've made your choice." With that, he began to chant again, his voice deepening with power. Maya felt herself drifting, her consciousness slipping away as the bond between them tightened, weaving her fate into his. The darkness was no longer something she could escape, it was part of her now. The price had been paid. As the ritual completed, Maya gasped, feeling the weight of the change inside her. She was alive, yes, but she was no longer the same. The world felt different now, the shadows darker, the air colder. Aaron stood over her, his expression unreadable. "You're mine now, Maya," he said, his voice both possessive and soothing. "And nothing will ever take you from me again." But as Maya closed her eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true cost of her decision was just beginning. Maya woke the next morning with a strange sensation, something was off. The air in the house felt heavier, the silence too thick. She sat up, feeling a strange pulse inside her chest, like an energy that didn't belong to her. Her body, once weak from illness, now felt oddly strong. But it wasn't her usual strength, it was something darker. She walked to the cracked mirror in the hallway, and what she saw made her heart skip. Her eyes, once a soft brown, now glowed faintly red. Her skin, pale and delicate the day before, now looked unnaturally smooth. The reflection staring back at her felt like a stranger, someone who wasn't quite human. "Maya," she whispered to herself. "What's happening to me?" The house was still quiet. "Aaron," she called out softly, but there was no answer. She wandered through the house, her mind spinning, but as she passed the living room, she saw something that froze her in her tracks. A woman stood in the doorway, shrouded in shadows. Her hair was long and black, flowing like ink. Her dress looked ancient, torn and faded. But it was her eyes, glowing a fiery red, that chilled Maya to her core. The woman smiled cruelly. "You shouldn't have accepted him," she whispered. "Now you belong to him. You'll never be free again." Maya's heart raced. "Who are you?" she gasped, fear flooding her chest. The woman's presence was powerful, suffocating, like a dark cloud hanging over her. "I was once like you," the woman said with a sadistic smirk. "A fool who trusted him. He's a demon, and now you're his." The air grew colder, and the woman flickered like a fading shadow. With a final warning, she vanished. Maya staggered back, trying to process what had just happened. A demon. Asterisk. Before she could react further, Aaron appeared at the door. His eyes glowed red. "You've met her," he said, a dark smirk playing on his lips. Maya's heart sank. "What have I become?" "You've become mine," Aaron whispered, his voice chilling. "Forever." Maya could feel the weight of Aaron's words pressing down on her chest like a 1,000-pound stone. "You've become mine. Forever." The house seemed to close in around her. The once familiar walls now felt suffocating, and the air was thick with a heaviness she couldn't shake. Her breath quickened as panic surged through her. She wanted to scream, to run, but there was nowhere to go. She could feel the connection to Aaron deep inside her, an invisible bond that tied her to him in a way she could never undo. Aaron took a slow step forward, his red eyes glowing even brighter in the dim light of the room. He was closer now, his presence overwhelming. Maya's heart raced as she struggled to comprehend everything that had happened. Was he really a demon? Had she truly made a deal with something so dark and dangerous? "Maya," he said softly, his voice a mixture of temptation and assurance. "You're still thinking too much. You're mine now, and you will be for all eternity. There's no escaping it, but I can make it easier for you. I can give you everything you want: power, immortality, protection from the world. All you have to do is accept it." Maya trembled, her mind reeling. She didn't know what to believe anymore. The woman's warning echoed in her mind: "He's a demon. And now, you're his." Her eyes flicked to the mirror again, and for the first time, she saw what Aaron's words meant. She was no longer the girl she had been. The person staring back at her was changed, tainted, marked by something far beyond her control. "I can't," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I can't be like this. I don't want this." Aaron's smile softened, but it was no comfort. "You've already made your choice, Maya. This is your reality now. You belong to me, and in time, you'll understand. You'll see how much better your life can be with me." Maya felt a surge of anger, mingled with fear. She didn't want this, but she could feel the pull inside her, the dark force urging her to accept it. As Aaron reached out and gently cupped her face, the room seemed to grow darker, colder. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the suffocating weight of her decision. "I don't have a choice, do I?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No," Aaron replied, his fingers brushing against her skin like ice. "But you will learn to love this new life. You will learn to love me." Maya stood there, unable to move, as the world around her felt like it was fading into shadow. She had made a choice, and there was no turning back. The demon had claimed her, and now, she belonged to him, forever.